The Road to Autonomy is presented by the Road to Autonomy Index. The Road to Autonomy Index is a rules-based equity benchmark index that measures the performance of a basket of global companies that are involved in the development and commercialization of autonomy. Institutional investors and fund managers are watching megatrends that are shaping investment opportunities today. These megatrends are creating thematic investment ideas and opportunities for forward-thinking investors. We believe that one of the biggest megatrends today is autonomy. That's why we created the Road to Autonomy Index, the world's first and only pure-play index to track the thematic investment opportunity in autonomy. Follow the Road to Autonomy Index on your favorite finance app by simply typing in the ticker Autonomy. To learn more about the Road to Autonomy Index, visit roadtoautonomy.com/index. Hello and welcome to the Road to Autonomy. I'm your host, Grayson Brulte. On today's episode, we're absolutely honored to welcome Gabe Sganga, Head of Commercial Growth RRAI. Gabe, welcome to the podcast.
Grayson, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here because RRAI is saving lives and you're helping the military. So first of all, you are a Marine, so thank you for your service and thank you to what you and the men and women at RRAI are doing to help our military. Gabe, to kick things off, why autonomy for defense?
Well, Grayson, RRAI has always been a defense-first company. Strategically, we're focused on delivering defense capabilities to support funded programs right now and on multiple commercial pilots as we scale. The autonomy requirements of defense operational design domains and commercial have so much overlap. So we get the best of both worlds with our common stack, directly supporting national security missions and indirectly by leveraging those technology investments to modernize brittle supply chains that directly impact national security and the global economy. And personally, my background in defense instilled an understanding that tech could aid the warfighter in ways that manually and in historical engagements were not possible. I experienced this watching the advent of command and control software and how dramatically it changed battlefield situational awareness for coalition forces. Autonomy is the next frontier for paradigm shifting changes in warfare. We're seeing it right now in Ukraine and elsewhere in the world with drones and other things that are going out and getting involved in the missions and changing the way that humans wage war. And we're at this inflection point where we need to seize the initiative if we're going to continue to dominate on the world stage and have a Western way of life that we've come to enjoy and want to spread. And whether it's deploying autonomous ground vehicles with human-targeted offensive capabilities like rockets or missiles, or delivering beans, bullets, and Band-Aids via autonomous ground resupply, robots don't bleed. For those of us who've served in ground combat roles, getting humans out of harm's way is critical to evolving the way that we fight wars to meet today's challenges.
You're right about that. You said it very eloquently. Has your systems been deployed in theater around the world?
We have deployed to Afghanistan. That was a few years ago. Obviously, there's no footprint there. And we've currently got a project underway in the Gulf states where we're doing an autonomous ground resupply. But originally, the defense interest in this was how do we get humans out of the way, right? How do we get them out of harm's way? And how do we be able to do more and project power more efficiently?
You're saving lives, which is the most important part. But to me, as a commander, it seems that you're optimizing my operations. You're making them more efficient while making them safer. The bad guys, okay? Bad guys have guns. We're not in a John Wayne shootout. There's bad guys, and we see it in Platoon and all sorts of movies. When the bad guy starts going bang, bang, bang and shooting at your robot, the robot's not going to shoot back and go bang, bang, bang. What does it do if it hits a critical component such as a LiDAR?
Well, first of all, it depends on the vehicle. It could shoot back in some cases. Not autonomously. We're still very focused on the DoD objective of human-controlled offensive weapon systems. But being able to move autonomously on the battlefield and get into an advantageous position where you could be affected by enemy fire is actually a big argument for autonomy, right? If you end up getting blown up, your truck ends up getting blown up, the human cost is real. You can go ahead and print another truck a lot easier than you can print another human. And I think that when it comes to critical components, we believe in redundancy. We have designed our vehicle systems for redundancy, and we believe in multidimensional perception. It's not just a matter of having one LiDAR on the corners and one LiDAR and a radar on the top. It's a combination of optical sensors, radar, LiDAR, We're doing registration for objects on the ground to do better localization. These are all things that we learned because our initial kind of objective was to operate in a GPS denied environment. And you have to have all of these redundant means of communicating and controlling the vehicle, sending it commands, and ensuring that it'll execute.
Can your system be used to clear mines? That's a traditionally very dangerous job. Can we send one of your autonomous bots in there to clear mines?
Yeah, absolutely. It's probably one of the better uses. Autonomous vehicle route clearance would have saved countless lives in Iraq and Afghanistan. And ultimately, there's no amount of armor that'll overcome an IED blast, right? Autonomous vehicles can be used and should be used for clearing mines. I think we're already seeing kind of some rudimentary teleopt vehicles or remote controlled tractors that are going out with flails and clearing Ukrainian terrain. It's easy to replace a vehicle. And we think that those are especially the use cases where autonomy is so uniquely suited to make a difference.
It's making it possible. You're learning a lot. You're learning a lot when you put your vehicles in harm's way, in harsh conditions. You have boulders, you have rocks, you have bad guys. You have all the makings of a horror movie here for autonomous vehicles. What have you learned from your defense applications from deploying it there that you can apply to your civilian business?
So I think there's a number of things. First, for our applications, we see wear and tear in the systems from the harsh environments they're exposed to, the weather conditions, degraded GPS, poorly built roads. These are all critical for protecting the end users in those environments, right? Those are the lessons that we've fought hard to win. Operating in these conditions is not unique to defense. It's unique to end users who tackle the hardest jobs that keep the industrial heart of our country and economy running. And that includes forestry in Canada and in the United States. It includes resource extraction, oil sand operations in West Texas. I mean, these are literally things that we don't think about on a daily basis. But if you hand somebody a business card or write on a piece of paper, that paper comes from somewhere. And the fuel that you put in your car, all of those things come back to being critical links between the defense and commercial applications of our technology. I think we find also that integrating closely with an OEM for defense applications and all the system design that's required to do that to build a logical safety case is nearly identical to the commercial world. Right now, the key differentiator is that the Department of Defense has a process that we adhere to. And to date, we're the only ones who've been certified as safe to operate globally for the Department of Defense via the Army's process. Commercial world is different. We self-certify. And when I first got involved and learned about the process, I said to myself, my gosh, this is crazy. You're letting the inmates run, the institution. But I have been so impressed across every partner that we've worked with, every competitor that we, are in this space with, the thoughtfulness that everybody puts towards this as we wait for federal regulations that are broadly applicable to go into effect. We look forward to that, but in the meantime, it's incumbent upon us to find ways to safely deploy, and we have to be able to sleep at night. Our engineers, the people who implement these systems, and the customers who operate them need to feel comfortable that they've done everything they can to ensure the safety and efficacy of the systems.
You bring up a very valid, positive point that has to be highlighted and emphasized more. The industry cares. You have a very good relationship with your competitors, but you view it from a safety. You don't compete. It's your peers, and you're sharing information on how to safely deploy. And the industry cares, both on the passenger side and the truck side from civilian applications. The industry really cares. Let's go into the oil sands. I've been studying the Canadian oil sands for a while. It snows in Canada. You have moose and you have all sorts of animals that live up there. But the real interesting point is the chairman of Imperial Oil based out of Canada came out recently and said by deploying autonomous trucks in the Canadian oil sands, he's saving $5 a barrel of oil, $5 a barrel. And I'm going to misquote him, but on the earnings call, he said, I can't wait to get my hands on these soon. I need more because it's helping my business. From an economic standpoint, are your clients looking at this from an efficiency standpoint? Are they looking at this as a way to improve their businesses? How are they looking at this, especially from a harsh environment such as oil sands?
Yeah, so I think the first lens that anybody looks at this through is the economics of human resources, right? Human resources are expensive. You have to have fully burdened folks doing these jobs. And that's normally what people look at. And they're like, well, is your system going to replace humans in my operation? And we always tell them it's going to change the way that you employ humans. It's going to change the nature of jobs, the same way that the automobile and the steam hammer changed the way that we move around the country and lay railroads, right? Those jobs didn't go away, they just changed. And when it comes to those kind of revolutionary kind of paradigm shifts in industry, there's going to be multiple facets of the value chain, right? So there's obviously the resource one that everybody looks at first, but there's also utilization. I think this is something that's so interesting. How do you understand, do you have the right number of vehicles out there? How do you know what your peak capacity is and how to monitor and meter your utilization so that you're getting the most effective life out of a vehicle, the most fuel or battery economy out of a vehicle? And then there's kind of the known unknowns, right? We know that it's going to make operations more efficient. We'll go back to the old military adage that slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right? You don't need to go 100 miles an hour to do the same amount of work, right? It's the old tortoise and the hare conundrum. Slow and steady does win this race because safety, efficiency, and sustainability are at the core of every company's mission statement that we're working with. And the predictability of robots is a big part of that for them too. Knowing that you can take some uncertainty out of your business operations. You know already that robots don't bleed, but you know what robots also don't do? They don't have a grand old time watching the Super Bowl and then show up late for work on a Monday. And there's countless other kind of ways that you can frame that. The thing I'd like to leave everyone with on this topic is that the jobs aren't going to go away. The jobs are going to change. The economy is changing in so many ways. And, we see this as a opportunity for organized labor and technology to work together. The tide is coming in, and we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to get on board the boat. And having a seat at the table and looking at it not as a threat, but as something that is going to change the way that they work and that is going to improve lives, right? Freeing up cognitive space for humans to do things that humans are really good at is the best use case for robotics today. When I think about what the future looks like, and I say to myself, what are the tasks that I would automate, right? I look at my kitchen. I love to cook. You know what I don't love to do? Chop vegetables. You go find any chef in the world. It doesn't matter how long they've been cooking. If their right hand is their dominant hand, go look at the tips of their left fingers. They're all going to have cuts. It doesn't matter how good you are. It literally just means that those repetitive movements are not things that humans are designed to do really well. We want to be creative. We want to do things that actually engage, the parts of our brain that stimulate engagement in an activity. And repetitive movements like doing drayage loops 100 times a day that are half a mile long doesn't really move the needle for most people. It's not considered to be exciting. So when we think about those dull, dirty, and dangerous tasks, those are the ones we want to automate first. And I think as we work through the value chain beyond just the human resources angle, there's a lot of things that I think we suspect and we will quantify as we have more actionable data from across all of our different customer sites.
Autonomy is good for the economy. Autonomy will create jobs. That's the bottom line. Autonomy will create jobs. It also saves lives. It's not just that, and it's going to create jobs that we can't even imagine. We're going to be able to deploy humans in really specialized skills. We talked a lot about defense. Let's get in the economics of that defense. How large is your defense business in comparison to the rest of your business? Do you have a defense division and then you have a civilian division, or what does that look like?
Well, defense and commercial, we share the same common product stack. That is a big focus for us, is reducing the amount of difference between defense application vehicles and commercial application vehicles. It's a big part of our business, and it will be for a long time to come, but it's not the key to our overall success. The US Department of Defense has traditionally led investment in the areas of ground autonomy way before commercial. The D in DARPA Grand Challenge stands for defense. And it's really only been the last 5 to 6 years where broad private investment focused on industrializing commercial workflows have come into maturity. Our defense heritage and decades of experience have put us on a path of deliberate, intentional growth with an eye towards the long term. Like any company, we have responsibilities to investors and customers, but we're not tied to artificial timelines. When we're ready to safely, efficiently, and sustainably scale, we will.
Do you view yourselves primarily as a defense contractor when you're putting this together? Or is this just one segment of the overall business?
No, I mean, I think historically we were a defense contractor. We were a defense research and development partner. A lot of the technology that's used today in ground autonomy was developed as part of programs that we worked closely with the Department of Defense on. During that time, we developed a deep and underlying expertise in autonomy, but we're focused on the dual use solution that can be leveraged by a defense ecosystem that also addresses the critical market needs on the commercial side. And specifically the underserved communities operating in off-road spaces, right? A good example of this is our public partnership with FP Innovations, which is the Canadian not-for-profit organization that focuses on supporting the Canadian forestry sector's global competitiveness. Their members include these remote First Nation locations where labor scarcity constantly threatens their economic health because forestry is the lifeblood of their economy, right? These are the pilot sites where we'll be demonstrating Class 8 truck autonomy in the next couple of weeks using the same core autonomy stack as our defense applications and demonstrating all weather capabilities in pretty challenging weather conditions. You talk about getting up into the Canadian wilderness and on some of these resource and logging roads, they're already getting snow, which we're really excited to go demonstrate our capability maneuvering in and through the occlusions, which, frankly, we've had to build our commercial stack to address because our defense stack was designed for it. It makes it much easier to translate, hey, we've built this for the harshest conditions in the world. This is a harsh commercial condition. There's just a lot of kind of overlap on that.
Snow, mud, everything that you'd have in the wilderness, timber, logs, your system, no problem right through those harsh elements.
I think if our engineers were within earshot, I would get slapped if I said it's no problem, because this is like a really gnarly problem to solve. But we think that it's solvable and we think that we've solved most of the pieces of it. I think when it comes to automated sensor cleaning and things like that, there's still a manual element to that in some ways because, a little windshield wiper on a LiDAR, probably not the thing you want, in a true off-road environment where these things are going to be going cross country. But what we've designed and deployed so far has been really successful. And it's been wonderful to see how these things have all kind of come together to create the whole autonomy system and the package that's driving these outcomes.
If you look at one of your investors, Luminar, they had a large focus on solving the love bug problem here in Florida because they're based in Orlando. Okay, our sensors are going to have to figure out how to solve this. You're doing the same thing from the harsh environments that you're running in. RRAI has a large focus on off-road autonomy. A lot of your competitors and peers don't have that outside of the agriculture industry. Why such a large focus on off-road autonomy?
I think when we did our initial strategy sessions when we were building out the business and thinking about how do we commercialize the technology that we've developed on the defense side, we looked and said off-road was the right place to start, right? I think if you look at like the regulatory burdens as just a starting point, the regulatory burdens are different. The ODDs are more controllable. You don't immediately have to go operate at highway speeds and mixed traffic where you really need to take the time to build public trust in a system, right? And for us, knowing that the maturity of our system was pretty advanced, we looked for opportunities with partners who had problems that we could help them solve in the near term. And we think that the off-road market, first of all, it's underserved. There's a tremendous part of the value chain there for overall supply chain and logistics. And when you look at the addressable market for middle mile, it's enormous. But we think the operational design domains where autonomy can actually generate scalable ROI sooner are in the first and last mile spaces. And they're specifically on unimproved road surfaces, cross-country overland, intermodal drayage, or inside the fence line or on property use cases, where you can start to take humans out of the equation and create a safer, more efficient workplace today.
Will you look to applications such as logging or ranching applications where if you're in Montana, Wyoming, very rough terrain, highly controlled ODD because it's all private property, I may add. Will you look at applications to potentially expand your off-road business and use cases such as that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the sky is the limit for where these technologies can be applied. It's just a matter of who the right partners are at first. So much of our careful selection of partners is about, are they the right folks for right now? At the production scale that we're at right now, these are still prototype systems. And we're working towards having scalable production systems. That takes time. We want people who want the strategic and competitive advantage of being the early adopters, who understand that we don't have every problem solved. And we wouldn't tell them that we did, even if we thought we were further along. We want to promise something that's reasonable and then over deliver. Our goal is to be in the spaces that we are right now because we think that they scale to multiple hundred and thousand vehicles over the course of the next several years. We don't want to jump into new spaces where we don't have experience yet without the right partners.
I like that. How much, when you're meeting with a customer or a potential partner, how much weight do they put on your defense background and your leadership team's military background? Does that become a competitive advantage for you?
I think in a lot of cases it does. We're all here on the leadership team on the business side because we mainly served in the Marine Corps either together or at different times in the Army. We've got Navy vets, Air Force vets. We all care deeply about the applications of autonomy for national security, but we view it as an opportunity to build these bridges between these defense and commercial technologies and apply it for both. And we think that that's, a great story to tell because people actually care about it, right? They want this ruggedized technology. They want to know that, it's been developed and tested to operate in the harshest environments, even if their harsh environment is a deep water port with saltwater spray and frequent rain occlusions for the sensors to work through. Even if they're not operating in the mountains of Afghanistan, they like the fact that we've built it for that and that we're unapologetically a defense first company.
When you're defense first, because you look at the salt water, I live on the ocean, and the salt water likes to eat things. It's not very nice to cars. It does chomp, 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 and eats away at that. So you're deploying at a deep water port. Do you have an upgrade cycle for the sensors, or do you build a special salt resistant housing that this goes in so the life of the vehicle can last longer than somebody bought a sensor off the shelf and bolted it on?
Yeah, so we do a incredibly detailed light study and sensor design every time that we automate a vehicle and every time that we assess a new ODD. That includes working with sensor manufacturers to harden their enclosures or building our own enclosures to better protect them. But in some cases, it's just a matter of saying, hey, we know that these things are going to be consumables, right? Because if you want to operate and gain the benefits of this, you're going to break things, you're going to run through things. Their service life is what it is. So for us, it's about the relationships with the sensor manufacturers and trying to optimize on warranty and replacement costs, right? Because we give them valuable feedback as their product testers. It's huge for them for us to come back and say, we love this, and this. Here are some things and some very detailed feedback along with the data that we've collected. And by the way, we'd be happy to come spend a couple of days with you guys and show you, what we're doing and, come see us and come see the vehicles and see your sensors actually up and running and what they're doing. It really creates, good ties and good relationships that we've leveraged to kind of reduce the complexity of replacing those things. Now, our model is autonomy as a service. So we don't want to have fleets that are operating on multiple different configurations. So for autonomy as a service, we wrap everything into, the single license price. So if we develop an integration with a new sensor that is more effective, more resilient to salt water, and is a better value for us, it makes sense for us to go and replace all of those old sensors across our fleet because we want to maintain the fewest configurations of hardware. That's another way that we think we can just optimize this for people because you don't want to be running, a yard truck has a lifespan of 7 years to 10 years maybe. depending on how much you use it or what your operational requirements are. You want something that's going to last, but you also don't want to be running 4 years in the future with today's sensor technology. As things advance so quickly, you want to get the latest and the greatest, both with software, but really with that hardware package.
Let's break down your autonomy as a service business model. Do you keep those vehicles on your balance sheet, or how does that model work? Or do you have a financing partner, or how does that work?
We have a flexible model right now. I think the model will change in the future. Today, the way that we've looked at it across retrofitting, across leasing, across owner operated fleets where we install our autonomy on there, we work with people wherever they are on their autonomy journey. Some people want to automate vehicles that they already have, and if those are vehicles that we've already automated, it's pretty straightforward. We know what the specs are to automate with a drive-by-wire, and we know kind of broadly what the sensor placements look like. When it's a vehicle that we haven't automated, we just work with them and figure that out. I don't think anybody has really solved this model yet. So for us, the thing that makes the most sense is being flexible and knowing that as we work with partners and we evolve and the technology matures, all of this is going to change. LiDARs today are very expensive. LiDARs tomorrow are also probably going to be very expensive. But in the future, and maybe the not so distant future, with scaled purchases, LiDARs could come down dramatically in price. And that's when you get to the point where these boutique expensive systems, just like battery electric vehicles, today they're expensive. In the future, they're going to be available for the masses the same way that Tesla has done, right? By the virtue of mass production, the price comes down. And you get them into the hands of people, their neighbors see them, and everybody wants them. We think that that's the way this market will continue to evolve. And it's why we've built our business model, both for commercial and for government. We have the government buying autonomy as a service from us as well. It's a major kind of sea change from them, from the way that they've traditionally done acquisitions business. But this is driven in large part by the way that we see war changing all around us right now. And they know that they have to adapt or they're going to get left behind. And we're going to send people to war without the army that we want.
We want the Army. So for the DoD case, are they viewing your autonomy as a service model as flexible because you can update the software, you can update the hardware so the vehicle doesn't become obsolete?
That's the big selling point for both commercial and defense customers, right? You want the most effective, latest generation technology. And let's face it, this is a software focused enterprise. There are bugs and there are features, and sometimes they are one and the same. You want to be able to have an extensible kind of contract that's flexible enough to allow you to make those changes. As you work with your end user partners, this autonomy as a service model is flexible enough to say, hey, we screwed up, and now we have to eat the cost of changing and upgrading these things, which incentivizes us not to screw up. And it really raises the stakes. And we think that it balances the risk in a way that puts the onus on us to really deliver outstanding results, both on the defense and the commercial side. And if we don't do that, somebody else will come take our lunch.
A valid point. Let's fast forward to the future. The business is scaling. Do you need an OEM deal at that point to have a factory grade truck?
Great question, Grayson. It's not that we need an OEM deal. It's that we want an OEM partnership. That's the best way to scale complex systems at production scale and to manage future enterprise deals. We are an autonomy company and we want to focus on doing what we're good at, which is automating vehicles, designing systems, improving perception methods and compute, and just continuing to get that form factor smaller and smaller so that space claims on vehicle of the future will, be minimal. I think in a perfect world, we're tightly integrated with multiple OEM partners that have auto drive enabled vehicles rolling off their production lines. To me, that's what success looks like. I don't want to have to open up a retrofitting line and do thousands of vehicles and build that out every year. It's not what we want to do. It's not what we're good at. We think that people should do the things that they're really good at. And the OEMs that we've been working with feel the same way. And, we think that that's the way that autonomy scales to the masses in a responsible and safe way. When you have the, brand cachet and reputation that a lot of these OEMs have, they're not going to do things that are unsafe or even perceived as risky, in a sprint to market. And we feel the same way. With a robust defense business, we don't have to do anything crazy in the near term. What we need to do is go demonstrate proficiency, which we're doing across a whole bunch of pilots right now on the commercial side. And when we're ready to scale with them, they'll be ready to scale with us.
That's a valid point. At some point in the future, I'm not going to give a timeline here. Your customers and your competitors' customers will demand that OEM integration. It's going to be the Gabe, you sit down for the meeting. Okay, Gabe, who's your OEM partner? If you don't have it, and that's going to start this whole whirlwind. On the OEM topic, obviously, there's different OEMs that do commercial trucks, different OEMs that do passenger cars, and then do military. Your business, you have the off-road business, you have the on-road business for commercial, and you have the military. Will you have to get different OEM for the military business versus the on-road, off-road business? Because some of these OEMs are specialized in these types of vehicles. Is that how you're approaching this, or is it a one-size-fits-all solution for RRAI?
So I would love to tell you that it's a one size fits all solution, but it's not that simple. And without defined kind of standardized interfaces across the autonomy world, that becomes a challenge. The DoD is actually pretty good at standardizing these things. So we usually build to that standard and we find that it meets the automotive quality requirements and the automotive safety standards. And that is a pretty compelling standpoint for our defense customers and our commercial customers to look at this from. We know that we'll have to work with multiple OEMs across these different lines because there are very few OEMs who make Class 8 trucks, yard trucks, special purpose use military vehicles, and whatever else we automate in the future. But we learn so much from these relationships and we constantly improve how we conduct ourselves and how we manage them. And it's been great to see so many different OEMs over the course of the brand's history that have led us to this place where we feel really good about saying, we may have once branded ourselves as like the Switzerland of autonomy, where auto drive is form factor agnostic, can go anywhere, but we know that you have to pick winners, right? And we want to pick OEMs who are the leaders in their space, who are good partners and want to work effectively alongside us and don't just look at us as a tier one vendor, right? Autonomy is too complicated for us to just kind of throw it over the transom and expect end users to successfully employ it safely. And it's probably going to be that way for a few years. So we've built the business around the partnerships that really matter, right? And, we want people who, when we send them an email and say, hey, the braking software on the base vehicle platform isn't responding the way that we expect it to, and we're seeing more latency. We want people who respond immediately and say, hey, can we get on a call and share some data and see what you're seeing? Because that's how you iterate rapidly, right? The whole focus for us is to get vehicles out into the world because you don't ever, we've got all sorts of testing sites and we have our huge off-road testing facility in Idaho. But until you get vehicles into users' hands, and they put them through the paces, you don't see all of those edge cases. You don't see all the things that they see where they're like, no, I do this manually every day. How come this can't do this? So you need that feedback loop to be very tight to be effective.
And say you have a happy customer as well. I mean, that's really what this comes down to. RRAI used to be known as Robotics Research. You've had a lot of focuses over the years, from leader follower to shuttles to off-road applications, defense. But now it seems that the business is maturing, and I want to use the word, you're becoming very focused. Is it yard trucks, off-road, on-road? Is that the main focus for the business now, or where's the business mainly focused? Because it really seems that it's all coming together for you.
Yeah, so we've done a lot of different things through the years, but I think the key to doing anything well is you put in the effort. We explored markets and we made decisions to exit when a commercially viable outcome became clear that it wasn't achievable. In commercial, that means that we're laser focused on ports, logistics centers, intermodal drayage, and the industrial off-road use cases as the places that we can move the needle for industry partners today. And we look at that and say to ourselves, they look so much like all the things we're doing on defense. So instead of having these competing developmental teams, we have a core product team. We have a core perception team. We have a core team working on the compute enclosures. All of these teams are working on the same thing, which allows us to advance together. And when we learn something really great and we fix something or improve something on defense, it propagates across our entire landscape, across the stack and across the code base to commercial. and all of the other defense use cases as well, which is wonderful, right? What you want to be able to do is develop a feature for one person who says, hey, I really, really need this thing. And you develop it, and then you can offer it to everybody else. That's the way that you build happy customers, by helping them solve problems that maybe they didn't even know existed, or to be more efficient and do things better. And those early customers will get kind of a louder voice at the table in terms of how we prioritize things, right? So I mean that's really what we have seen as the commercial path is we get these customers that we feel like we're aligned with. They believe in all the same things that we do. The values are there. They want to be safe. They want to be efficient. And they want that first mover advantage because they know that it's going to change the way they make strategic decisions around their business.
Are you seeing any trends around that first mover advantage, whether it's ports, logistics, on-road applications? Are you seeing any particular partner that keeps calling you, okay, I want this, I want this, I want this? Are you seeing any trends there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the greatest thing about piloting with so many different folks is that you really get to understand their problems. You get to understand the different places that they operate and the things that they do and the things that matter to them. And we do have customers say, well, hey, you solved this like sand drayage application for us. Now we have this like thing inside of our, on property, on fence line. Can you help us do this better too? And it's like, yeah, you can solve any problem. It's a matter of what problem you solve when. And there are some problems that, I think this is why a well-balanced business is so essential. You've got to have the engineering culture and mindset, but you also need to have the product and the business side sitting down together and saying, yes, this is a problem. We agree. Is this a problem that we should solve now? And are there other things that are more important, and how should we prioritize? And, I think, as I always tell customers when they're like, well, I need this now. I say, well, there's a really easy way to get prioritized in the queue, and it's to be the loudest voice with the biggest checkbook, right? But we think that our approach across defense and commercial has positioned us well to have those conversations and to present, hey, here's our roadmap, right? This is why this is here. This is why this is here. We're doing this for this defense program, which means we'll deliver it by this date, which means that you'll get it by this date, right? That's a pretty compelling thing when you're having those conversations and people are like, okay, you've actually thought about this. It makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. We talked a lot about off-road today. How are you approaching on-road applications? Are you looking at defined ODDs? Are you looking for the right partners, the right customers? How are you approaching the on-road applications?
Yeah, so I think for the on-road applications, I mean, we're operating right now, we'll call them in controlled spaces commercially, right? We're operating off-road where there are fewer vulnerable road users. We're operating on intermodal facilities, yards, ports, logistics centers. There are public road components to that, but we are not focused on pulling drivers out on public roads today for a variety of reasons. And most of them are regulatory, right? It's not that we don't think that the autonomy can handle the challenge. It's that we don't think that that is where we're going to move the needle at scale quite yet. We also look and say to ourselves, there's this giant like all stop button that regulatory bodies at a federal level have. And we want to insulate ourselves from the eventuality of an accident that causes regulators to say, hey, hold on a minute. We need federal regulations around this, which we've been saying for years. And we work closely with those regulators, but we know that it's hard to get to a consensus on what is safe enough and how do we integrate that onto America's highways and byways. So focusing on the spaces where we can move goods today is the entire model for how and why we're focused on yard trucks and class 8s in the commercial space.
So is that, in a nutshell, you're focused on private property, then looking to deploy autonomy on private property?
We could probably spend a whole nother episode talking about this. I love Lee White's framing about this as like the on property or inside the fence line use cases, but it's not just that, right? There's distribution center use cases that are truly self-contained, and they definitely look like on property, but those are on a two-dimensional surface, right? They're on roads that are generally improved surfaces. So, I find it hard sometimes to talk about what we do versus what we don't do. What we're focused on today is the spaces that are either unimproved road surfaces or are those contained ODDs, spaces where we can actually go end to end in a multi-phase pilot or an engagement where a customer says, "Hey, you've actually proven this. We're ready to place backlog orders for vehicles. As you guys are advancing production from low rate initial production to serial production." That's our target, right? We want to be able to focus on what does this scale look like. And I don't know that you get that scale in the near term on public roads. And this is the bet that we're making on these underserved off-road applications. Also, we'll have some exciting announcements about on-road drayage in the coming months, but TBD.
Okay, we'll have you back to talk about
Okay,
that. How's that
that
sound?
sounds great.
I won't push you there. You're spot on with the off road stuff. With your yard trucks, are there safety tents in there, safety drivers? Or are you operating those fully autonomous where you have them deployed?
So where we have the yard trucks deployed right now, we are operating them with a safety driver in. The safety driver is there to supervise the safe operation of the system. We are in the process of taking the safety driver out with a remote operations capability where one operator in a remote station will supervise one vehicle and then three vehicles and so on and so forth. And we think that that's how that is scalable today. We think the reason why is because it's supervised autonomy, guarded autonomy, right? I think the people who are afraid of automation are worried that like Skynet is going to magically move all of our packages and that it'll become self-aware and open them and maybe take our things. That is not the world that we're going to live in the next few years. It's a world where we optimize the robotic and human teaming, and we give the humans the ability to do more using robotics and to do less of the dull, dirty, and dangerous jobs that nobody wants to do.
When you're in that environment, can your yard trucks operate in mixed traffic conditions where you have the autonomous yard tractor here and the human driven vehicle there?
Yeah, so we have operated in mixed traffic for several years. We did it first with our Ollie shuttles, which was our first foray into commercial. They are adorable. We still have a couple of them sitting in the shop. If you come visit us, we'll let you poke around in them. But what we realized is, even though they were very capable of operating in mixed traffic alongside manually operated vehicles, people moving was not a business model that the market was ready for. So we focused on the commercial logistics space where, frankly, if you can move margins by half a point or more, you're making a big difference in these commercial businesses. So we have run yard truck pilots in mixed traffic with autonomous hostlers running with manually operated Class 8 trucks and other yard hostlers in the same space. And we did it safely and we did it efficiently. And we did over 4,000 successful moves over the course of that pilot. So the things we learned there caused us to go back and make improvements. And as we continue to steadily improve, the goal is to demonstrate that autonomy is here. It's real, it's tangible, and it can make a difference today. And that end-to-end solution of having a driver out and remote operations of one to N is not that far off. And if you get on board today and make the decisions around how do we change our business plan to incorporate this in our enterprise? How do we incorporate these autonomous vehicles into our fleet buying plans, our recapitalization of assets? Those are the things that you're going to get today that if you're not an early adopter, you're just going to wait for.
You can operate in mixed traffic. If I'm operating that depot, now I'm very interested because some of your competitors in your trucks can't operate in mixed traffic. And to me, as a depot owner, putting the depot owner hat on here, that's a no-go. I'm not even taking the meeting because you're just going to cost me more money where your solution is going to save me money. Your solution, it's catching investors' attention. In January, RRAI raised $228 million Series A. SoftBank was one of your lead investors on that. How are you going to deploy that capital to scale the business?
So we use this capital to scale the commercial and defense businesses and accelerate and focus on the next generation of autonomous applications. I mean, we had been around the defense space and the commercial space for years, but these large DoD programs and scalable commercial opportunities require an increase in inventory, field testing, production, and really field support, right? Because otherwise, if you don't build a field support team, you send engineers out into the field who should be engineering the next generation solutions. If you get the right folks trained to operate the systems and to do those tier one fixes and get them back on the road, you actually have something that's scalable. And that's a big piece of this too, right? We think about how much this is going to save in human capital, but these vehicles are going to need humans to enable them to do these jobs and to kind of take all the different little band-aids off the ODDs and the mitigations that are in place until we have fully redundant factory by wire vehicles rolling out off the assembly line. So we have spent, the majority of the funding over the last couple of years building out those functions so that we're ready to scale when it's time.
Scalable's the key. That's what your investors want to hear. That's what your customers want to hear. That's what the market wants to hear. This industry doesn't scale. The industry doesn't succeed. So it will scale. That's my opinion. In your opinion, Gabe, what is the future of RRAI?
So we want to continue to be viewed by our partners as the most thoughtful, deliberate, safe, and efficient autonomy company. And we're laser focused on delivering impactful autonomy in the near term. The future is pretty bright for us. I think there'll be a lot of exciting announcements in the coming year on the commercial and the defense side. And we'll continue to cement our reputation as what is probably the longest running autonomy company in the US.
There's exciting times ahead for you. That's how I would describe that. As we look to wrap up this insightful conversation, what would you like our listeners to take away with them today?
I think the most important thing is that autonomy is more than just a two-dimensional challenge to be solved on highways and in cities, and that those resource-constrained, underserved markets represent a huge opportunity to accelerate our journey on the road to autonomy, where there's fewer regulatory burdens and a closer path to scale. So knowing that scale deployments for on-road are years away, we're hyper-focused on the addressable markets where we can deliver value today.
You're delivering value because autonomy is a business. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is RRAI. Gabe, thank you so much for coming on the road to autonomy today.
Grayson, it was a pleasure. I look forward to the next time.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye. If you've enjoyed listening, please kindly rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Want to get in touch? Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Road to Autonomy, or email podcast@roadtoautonomy.com. The Road to Autonomy podcast is produced by the Road to Autonomy LLC. The views and opinions expressed in the Road to Autonomy podcast do not necessarily reflect those views of the Road to Autonomy, its subsidiaries, its shareholders, directors, investors, or partners. The content discussed on this podcast is for informational purposes only. It should not be taken as legal, investment, tax, or business advice. Nothing is a recommendation that you purchase, sell, or hold any security or other investment, or that you pursue any investment style or strategy. The content of this podcast is presented on an as-is basis with no warranties, express or implied, of any kind. Financial mentions about companies in the Road to Autonomy Index and discussions about the Road to Autonomy Indexes are for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon when making any investment decision. Furthermore, an inclusion of security within the Road to Autonomy Index is not a recommendation by the Road to Autonomy Indices, LLC, to buy, sell, or hold that such security, nor is it considered to be investment advice.